Karibu to Wanjiku Talks Queer. I'm your host, Wanjiku Mwangi. And in today's discussion, we're going to be talking about conversion practices. And remember, this is where we talk about queer African lives, and we do this through storytelling, truth-seeking, and truth-telling. So before we delve much deeper in the topic, I'll let the guests for today introduce themselves. Karibuni sana.
Asante.
Thank you.
I'll start from here. Feel free to tell us your name, your pronouns, and I'm also curious to hear how your activism intersects with conversion practices. Yes.
My name is Masafu Okwara. My pronouns are she and her. I am a queer activist, a lesbian Kenyan. I'm also a human rights lawyer, and a lot of my work revolves around legal protections for queer people and often how it intersects with conversion practices. The so-called conversion practice is that I provide a lot of legal care for survivors of conversion practice, legal care, legal redress for survivors of conversion practice.
Okay, great. Nice to have you here, Masafu.
Asante.
Thank you, Masafu. My name is Florence Fauna or Flo. My pronouns change depending on where I am. They, them is okay. Sometimes two-spirited. I'm an African lesbian woman. And I'm a theologian. How my activism interacts with what I do is I use religion to critique the things that have been imported into Africa through religion and sometimes oppress queer people. So for me, I do liberation theology, looking at biblical texts to affirm queer lives. And I love doing that.
Nice. Nice to have you, Florence.
My name is Francis Owaka. I am an academician. I teach at the University of Nairobi. Essentially, I'm a philosopher, but since philosophy is many a times misconstrued, I am a practical philosopher in the sense that I try to apply my skills and knowledge to have impact on society and interrogate relationships. Essentially, therefore, I am being an academic. It means that I am a social thinker. It is my duty to think for the society, and thinking can be right or wrong, by the way. So essentially what I'm doing is, if you think that what I'm thinking about is right, then you bring it, we shall debate it. If you think what I'm thinking about is wrong, then you bring it on the table, we debate it. In addition, I am in human rights. Applied philosophy that is called moral philosophy, where we are concerned with values, how values are generated, how values are patterned, and how values evolve over time. Essentially, again, we are simply saying that I'm interested in why people should not enjoy their rights, because rights are owed to individuals. Even if they're group rights, they are owed to the individual, then the group. So I am here to talk about how the gender and sexual minorities should not enjoy their rights. Of course, many misconceptions. Again, it has to do with the age, historical point at which our society is.
We're glad to have you. I like the way you're saying, it is my duty to think for the society with a lot of conviction. So I can't even wait to hear your opinions around this. But again, as we said, today's episode is deeply personal and it is very political while at it. And I'd like us to, first of all, start by talking about the violence and societal conditioning that has happened, you know. So some of these conversion practices, especially in the Kenyan context, they are not necessarily, they might be minute all along to the, you know, to however deeper it is. So Masafu, what is conversion practices, even before we say too much about it, in a way that a layman person can understand?
For lack of I'll start with an example and then give hopefully a definitive concept of what conversion practice
Yeah,
is.
absolutely.
So conversion practice is attempting to change. If someone is born with a left hand, it's attempting to change, you know, who they were born as. So the way you cannot change someone, it's attempting to change an innate part of a human being. So in terms of a textbook definition of what conversion practice is coercing an individual to change an innate aspect of their humanity. So either their sexual orientation or gender identity, or a sex characteristic, anything that has to do with who they are and how they exist as a human being, even though they do not have control over these aspects of their humanity.
Yeah, okay, that's a very good description. And I like the fact that you've started with an example, because you were actually talking about this example with Prof, and we were just saying how they used to have a footballer in their village who used to kick very well with their left foot.
In school.
Yeah, in school. So they would score goals, and everyone is okay with that until we go to the classroom or in the dining room. We do not want him to hold the spoon with the left hand, or even write with the left hand, So again, good definition. So I'm curious to also now hear from Fauna. What are some of the examples of conversion practices, specifically when you're trying to change the sexual orientation or rather gender identity? What are some of the practices that you've heard from your congregants? What have they gone through?
I would like to just say what Masafu just said. It's not conversion practices, it's conversion violence.
Agreed.
And violence because it's like trying to change an apple to be an orange.
Yeah.
Some of the things that have been done to change people's sexuality, gender identities within the religious space is prayer. Like the whole village is told to pray for you because you're obsessed, you're demonic. It's confession, like you're literally forced to confess your sins. I have a specific narrative. The reason why I wear my collar is because a gay man on his deathbed was forced to denounce his queerness. He wasn't able, and so the church would not bury him. I wear this collar because conversion practice is not just harmful when you are alive. It's as harmful until your body cannot be given dignity. So conversion practice is when someone is told to denounce their whole identity, even on their deathbed.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear that. And I feel like that's also a very important conversation to have, because who accepts us even when we die as a queer community? And that also extends to, at a point where people know you're dying and, who's going to bury you, all those things. And same case to things like religion. There is a story I've read before, and it was very clear on the fact that, of course, Christians are going to use prayers on you. If you're a Muslim, every other time you go to the kathy, there's a specific man who shared the experience that they used to go on Friday to the mosque, and they would put his thumb in between a wood. And so he had to confess and say some particular words that you're saying, I am whatever, I'm a disgrace, I'm evil, blah, 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 like ni kama shetani litoke, some sort of those things. So I'm also curious for us to talk a little bit about spiritual abuse. Because again, we're saying this is abuse. So I specifically want us to focus on the pointers on, other than prayers, what has religion done to normalize the violence within our social system? And I would also really want to hear professors' input on this as well.
You see, conversion practices, I like the narrative that you've brought up. This gentleman was a star footballer, and he would score using his left foot in very, very precarious positions. And we would applaud him, he would win us trophies. But so we appreciated him. So we had two types of the same guy, the footballer and the man who is in the dining room or classroom. So the footballer was a very good man. The guy who is sharing a table with us was evil because it was bad luck. Using left hand, left foot, now outside the field would mean other things other than what we knew. But let me just share with you what my two panelists have been saying. You see, society is made up of very good people. Actually, God is a very strange being because God created those who believe in creation. So God created a human being. We don't know how that human being was, but it was to be in his image. So the image of God is, if you conjure it up, you close your eyes, you see an all good thing, that a being that is good. Then Jesus, okay, in Christianity,
You're giving
Christian
us a
theology.
history of
Yeah. So he came to redeem the fall from grace, isn't it?
Okay.
Man's fall from grace. So, and the argument is that you are born with an original sin. Okay? So Jesus and confession is part of that process. And it is very clear in Christian practice on what ought to be good and what ought to be encouraged and what ought to be discouraged. But the other side of it, human beings are just wood. You can create a table out of that wood. You can create a stool out of that wood. Depends on what you want to do with it. Then the other side. So this is the evil side. This is the neutral side. But there's also the other side of human beings. Man is all good. Human beings are all good. It is society through its values. The values are constricting. It is these values that are constricting that now create homophobic individuals. You don't want people who drink water by making some sound. How does it concern you? It is my mouth. It is my body. You don't want people who take black tea. You don't want people who take milk. So you see, over time, it becomes normal to say that doing things in this way is not right. So the danger with this negative attitude is to impose on people who are actually normal, in a normal way, an abnormal behavior which you want them to recognize as normal.
I feel like that's a very interesting perspective, and especially when you're giving the example, I remembered I hate it when mtu anafanya na sufuria na kisu. I'm like, oh my God, my whole body is chilling. But I'm not gonna kill that person. I'm not gonna. So it made a lot of sense to me. And while we're still on the same topic, I'd really want us to discuss about how culture and how masculinity and femininity has also been used as a tool for violence, especially. So how has cultural expectations led to the conversion practices that we're talking about, Masafu? What's your thoughts?
So, a lot of culture and societal norm inform the conditioning that we see in society, because these norms also inform how our legislation is made to some extent. So these norms, this culture, this conditioning sort of shape up what our society morphs out to be, or how our everyday life pans out. So having said that, these norms mold and have an influence on how our laws are made, on how we treat people next to us, people who live with us, people we know, and these norms facilitate, or rather are a conveyor belt for ways in which people are treated in society. So in terms of conversion violence, as Fauna has told us, is that norms are conveyor belts to facilitate conversion violence. And specifically within the law, we've seen that with the criminalization of adult consensual same-sex love and intimacy, the norms around that facilitate and affect our everyday lives as lesbian, bisexual, gay, queer, intersex Kenyans in very many ways, because these norms facilitate and enable the experiences that we have. So, for instance, these are the norms that would enable a politician to stand before an audience and call for beheading of queer people, because these are the norms that have informed and enabled this politician to have that kind of power or boldness to actually speak to such an illegality, because these norms have ensured that this person knows there will be no consequences for these words that I get to speak. So these norms facilitate a lot of human rights violations, for instance, especially around conversion practice. And even that Africa as a continent, Africa as a continent, I have to get that correct. Africa as a continent, we sadly do not have any country that explicitly bans conversion violence. So that in itself is a very huge legal loophole that I know we'll be talking about later.
Absolutely. And I like the fact that you're talking about norms, you're talking about Africa, and I can't help myself and wonder, traditionally, where were we at? Where are we? And let's also talk about, is family as a unit in the society, or rather in the community, rationalizing this violence? What's your thoughts, Fauna?
I think I'll start from where Professor left. First of all, when you talk about spirituality and how it's used as a weapon, unfortunately, what happens with religion is that the soul of a human being is the merchandise. And we live in a world where all of us as human beings, we're always anxious about what happens to me after I'm dead.
Yeah. Do you even think we should care what happens to us when we die?
I think it's normal. It's a human thing. It's existential.
Okay.
Like every human being is always asking, even when church tells you'll go to heaven, there's always wondering, like, where is that heaven and how does it look like? And there's always no answer.
Yeah.
So, and realizing that there's this kind of gap that is very existential for every human being. And then there's a narrative about everyone who is good is going to heaven. And if you're gay, you're evil. So what happens? So religion uses that to ride on manipulating queer people. Because when we talk about religion as a sin, homosexuality as a sin, then you have no future for your life after you're dead. How African communities are affected? One, homosexuality is not imported. Homophobia is. And because we have a lot of history about queer expressions before Christianity, before Islam. And so there's a whole undoing that African people can do about how religion has impacted on how we were socialized. Because there's a lot of history that either undocumented or not put on the front line about queer expressions in communities. And I love giving this example, Wanjiku, and I know I've done this before. In the Kikuyu culture, there's always tomboy is Wajakehe. Wanja is a girl who behaved like a boy. Kehe is a boy who is uncircumcised. So for every girl who behaved like a boy was named Wajakehe. And I think it was named before my grandmother interacted with any white person. So there are these expressions that existed, but we do not major on them. We demonize them, we silence those voices.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you've given that example, because there's also the other example of going round the Mugumo trees. It's 7 times.
Which I did.
Yeah, so then you can change to a boy or a girl. And on that note, I'd be really curious to hear on the fact that, of course, Mogumo tree, kama unaenda around, it is you, you've consented, you want to change to a boy, so go around that tree 7 times. So can we consent to a conversion practice or to a conversion violence, Masafu?
Absolutely not. First, I'll have to start by saying that conversion practice or conversion violence is a medical malpractice. It's medical negligence. Because when you look at the nature of conversion violence, there's a lot of manipulation involved. There's a lot of gaslighting involved. There's a lot of coercion involved. And when it comes to informed consent, for you to, for instance, for a therapist to pathologize sexual orientation, they're required to give a lot of informed consent. So from the very beginning, that informed consent in itself is coercion, it's manipulation, it's inaccurate information. So even though there are critics who've argued that you can actually consent to conversion violence, you cannot consent to a human rights violation. Some time back, we had a case where we had a doctor who went to court and was saying they should be allowed to move forward with FGM. So consequently, no one can consent to conversion violence, whether they're an adult of sound mind or not. No one can consent to violence or a human rights violation in itself.
Yeah, I like the way that you're even giving an example of FGM. Someone can still say, but huyo msichana alikubali. So it makes a lot of sense. And this takes me back to you, Prof. You deal with a lot of students. And as we know, students are a reflection of our society. Yeah, so I'm really curious to hear during these interactions, what are some of the things that you've picked up, especially about the queer community?
Yeah, but before I respond to that, let me just maybe take a small cue from what has been discussed before. You see, consent, any consent must support self-interest. There is no way you can consent to something an action that is against your interest. I find it very strange when anyone makes that argument that this is against my interest, but I consented. It is not true that you can do that. True, for a simple reason. Why would I please all of you? In the end, I'm crying. I would never do that. Two, there is something about African culture. You see, Africa's history was interrupted by colonialism, especially Christianity. Islam, we give them that small chance because Islam is different for reasons other than what I'm going to say here. You see, in Africa, age is very important. Huyu ni mzee, so he knows. Whatever he says is law. Two, leadership. And then Christianity reinforced that idea of leadership. A leader ni mudhamaki. Okay? Atongoria. And then ni mheshimiwa. Now, you see, there is something that happened when Christianity came in. They brought the Bible. They told us to kneel down. But you see, the priest, I'm Catholic, non-practicing. The priest would always have a gun to protect himself against enemies. But he's telling you things. Happy are the weak. He's protecting himself. He used that gun and gave to the local chief. There's a very, very nice book. I may recommend it to you, but I'm not sure that it is in. Yes, it is. Textbook Center and Prestige. a book by titled Muntu by Jody Craft. That is the play that it was enacted in 1974 during the opening of African All Conference of Churches. That is Westlands, that Dingira around there. In this book, Muntu has sons, 1, 2, 3, 4, and daughters. But the second son loves war, and he's given a gun, the second son of Muntu, and he uses that gun to subdue the brothers. That is what is happening in Africa. We love violence. We love having power. So the moment I get into leadership, you must bow before me. Unlike the Asians culture is different. They serve. Ours is having power for the sake of it. Finally, you asked a question. Is the family rationalizing violence? Of course, yes. Which family wants to be in sin? All families must live in sin. Reverend is here. She knows. All our ancestors are in heaven. That's what Christianity tells us. Before Christianity, all the ancestors who died, they died in sin. And you want me to die also in sin. So I don't want to die in sin. Except those who know that those are stories. Those are fairy stories.
So what I hear from you is the informed make better decisions as compared to those that are not informed.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
And that is now where we have a problem. The informed, I've said this and I'm repeating it here, please. That if there's a problem in urban centers or in Kenya or in Africa, so there's a riot and there's a hotel here, there is a bar, there is a church, and there is a bookshop, run to the bookshop. Nobody will attack a bookshop. Africans don't read.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so you see, nobody wants to understand what this is. Masafu gave a very good example. Why do you want to change my eating habits? This is how I was created. Remember, nobody tells you to use the right hand. Mother may try, but you see, naturally, the potential of a human being is to enjoy what is easier for him by nature. So the left hand is good, but we used to beat them. So they enjoy it. Equally, heterosexuality is good. When you tell them, I am not heterosexual, they think something is not right. So nobody wants to look for evidence because it is not right. From the beginning, when God created the earth and the heavens, he decided it was not good.
I like the fact that you've highlighted the absence and the presence of evidence and what that does within the conversation that we're having. And I'm really curious to hear whether we have any legal protection in Kenya for queer persons who are undergoing through conversion practices. And I'd also want you to share any legal issues and cases that you've handled about conversion practices and how far that has gone, especially if it's in courts.
So number one, we don't have explicit legislation that is codified to criminalize harmful conversion practices or conversion violence as we've been guided. So that therefore leaves a legal vacuum. So we have what the books say and we have what happens in practice. So having said that, it means that, so within the Kenyan legal system, if an offense is not written down, you cannot be charged for an offense that does not exist. So that's why we have the penal code that says if you steal, you'll be sentenced to this number of years. So we don't have a definitive code that criminalizes conversion violence. However, we do have what happens in practice is that we have our beautiful Kenyan constitution that provides very beautiful constitutional liberties. For instance, we have an absolute freedom from torture, cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment. So in practice, even though we have a legal vacuum around conversion violence, cases of conversion violence go through the system as cases of torture, cases of violence, cases of assault. But even as they're going through our legal system, there is no recognition or naming of conversion violence as, this was conversion violence. It will just be listed as, this is a case of assault. So it will go through the criminal justice system as an assault case. So the danger of not naming that particular case as conversion practice or conversion violence is that it goes unchecked. There's very little awareness about, this was actually conversion practice. The other thing is that within our Kenyan legal system, prosecuting cases such as exorcism, the subtle nature of violence, or producing evidence around these iterations of violence that come out of conversion practice is very difficult. So you find that a lot of these cases are very invisible. Cases of conversion practice are very invisible. That said, it doesn't mean that based on the cases that we have actively prosecuted, is that these particular cases just go through the system as cases of torture, violence, blackmail and extortion, aggravated assault, but that's just as far as they go. So coming back and narrowing down to the laws that exist, we have very beautiful legislation. For instance, our constitution explicitly makes cases of torture, provides that Kenyan citizens, and including lesbian, bisexual, queer, transgender, intersex Kenyan citizen, are safeguarded from torture, cruel, inhumane, degrading treatment. And this is safeguarded within the ambits of our constitution. So having said that, and as I conclude, is that number one, there's a very big legal vacuum in terms of cases of conversion violence. Number two, even though there is a legal vacuum, these cases still get prosecuted. And number three is that we have legislation that prosecutes iterations from conversion violence. So the danger is that we do not have legislation that actually names conversion violence as an offense. And that means that people continue to perpetuate a lot of conversion violence without any consequences because it's not named and listed as an offense.
Okay, that's sad, but I'm glad that you're able to highlight that, and hopefully we'd be able to have a proper legislation that guides against this form of violence. I'm also curious to just hear how it affects queers emotionally, especially. What are some of the scars that are left behind when, for example, you've managed to get away from the practice of violence, or rather you've even had to live through it? What are some of the psychological and emotional scars that, stay for long after the prayers, after the rituals? Fauna, what's your opinion?
From a religious perspective, one of the things that is really fortunate and unfortunate on the continent is that statistics show that 60% of the African population by 2050 will be Christians. And which means that Christianity is moving to the global south and specifically to Africa. How we interpret the scriptures is just another whole story. What this kind of scars that it leaves, it is very manipulative. And as I said earlier, it's about existential traumas. It denounces someone's spirituality. Because if you're gay, then you have no connection with the divine. So how do you live with yourself? It's not something that is visible. How it manifests on queer people is a lot of being very dysfunctional. It is trauma. It is abuse of, coping mechanism, drugs, alcoholism, whatever, just to survive. Suicide. It is really traumatizing, because how you exist without a connection with the divine is really a whole question, especially when religion becomes the founding. I like what Masafu is saying, but Christianity in Africa is like a foundation for even the legal system. I like what the late Mbiti said, that in Africa, we do not separate the sacred from the secular. We embody everything. If a black cat passes before me, I'm like, I think I have a bad day. It's spiritual. So for an MP who just was going to pass some legislation, sees the black cat, and all of a sudden decides, the gods are talking, I'm not going to sign that thing. So there's no way that we separate that. And even when we embrace the religion of, like, the missionaries, we still carry that baggage to parliament. We go there and say, according to our culture, according to our religion, and we make policies based on religion.
That's really
So
interesting.
it traumatizes queer people
Yeah.
when language, very destructive language, is religious, it's political, it's cultural. I call it the unholy trinity. It's bad, it damages souls.
Interesting. And I like the fact that you've brought up language, because language is a whole other discussion, and we know how that distorts us. But I'm also very curious to hear from you, Prof. How do you think then we can reclaim the truth as queer persons, especially still having a conversation around conversion practices? How can we reclaim our own truth?
Wanjiku, let's begin from here. I am just imagining the statistics. UNDP is now busy tallying the statistics on sexual and gender minorities. I think the exercise should end in, this is September. So the exercise, the data should be analyzed. It should be out by latest November. The exercise should have ended by July. But on a very, very conservative pedestal, just when I use common sense. I am looking at a population of 1.3 to 1.5 sexual and gender minorities in Kenya. Translate that to a percentage. We're talking about 2%. You want to ignore them? Your head must not be functioning.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge percentage. You want to ignore what they're doing, and you are making laws that you think should guide them in what they are doing when you are not caring about their interest. We need to understand who they are. It is important that really, my good panelist is talking about African culture. Everybody talks about African culture. Which African culture? Am I part of that African culture? I'm not sure that I am. Am I part of that Christianity? I'm not sure that I am. I am not. I am a Christian, but I don't understand some of the things they're talking about, because the Bible has a big problem. The Bible is a historical text. You can't freeze time and tell us you are interpreting the Bible the way Nebuchadnezzar was interpreting the Bible. Surely. I think when I entered here, I had a problem switching off my phone. I had to seek assistance. But my daughter does it very easily. She's a kid, but she does it very easily. It means I am old-fashioned. We call it. Okay, let me not go there. When cultural implements, values, and traits become outdated, in other words, they stop serving our interest, we change. We change fashion. Currently, I hear a lot of noise about my dress, my dress, my choice. This fashion that is now in vogue right now in Kenya, was there in 1962. I want you to look at a photo of Mama Ngina Kenyatta and Pamela Mboya at Studio One in 1968. It should be in the archive somewhere. Look at them and look at their hairstyles. These are just normal things. So ni mviringo, the way dunia ni mviringo, pia culture should be, there's no culture that is static. We need just to deconstruct. And again, we have to blame it on ourselves. We are receptors. We love the food. We love Western food. But we've never told them that there's the alternative food that we have. So this culture is good and Western culture is good. But it is easy to manipulate. But African culture is complex. So the human mind is, I'm not a psychologist, the human mind will rather deal with what is easy and simple than what is complex. So in my community where I come from, if you are left-handed, we will deal with you. We will tie your hand, the entire arm. We tie it on your body. So when there's time to eat, you only have one choice. You use this. Sure, but that's not right. That's not human. Let's not even talk about human rights. That is just not human. Forget about the right. Ignore the right part of it. So there are many, many rights that Africa has, less minus the Universal Declaration or Western culture. But you see, black cat. She talked about black cat, black spot, black. But anything black is not good. It is our business, you and me, to bring this black into mainstream epistemologies, mainstream knowledge, which we don't. Again, we feel inferior. It is that inferiority. Please, if you allow me a second, you asked Reverend an interesting question. How does it impact on the subject? Of course, they want you to feel ashamed. Now you see, the moment you feel ashamed of yourself, then you are dehumanized. That is why Jesus is white. That is why the devil is what? Black. But remember, devil, Lucifer was what? An angel. So at what time did we paint him with kiwi?
Where? Food for thought, food for thought, food for thought.
I think Wanjiku, I'd like to support what Prof is saying. There's something about demonizing African culture. And what religion has done in Africa is that it has taken everything that was African and called it fetish. It has told us that you're not supposed to pray to your ancestors because it's ungodly, it's witchcraft. But there's something about the Bible. Why don't we ever question when Jesus is experiencing transfiguration, Moses and Elijah appear, who are supposed to be his ancestors? And we don't question that. We call it transfiguration. So if I said today that I saw my grandmother last night, that's not transfiguration. You're supposed to not relate with the dead. But Jesus did that.
It is the language.
It's how we interpret. It's how the lens that we use. So for me, I think culture is deep. There's a way that we should employ a lens of critiquing. If you have watched Simba, just simple Simba, the movie, the kids' movie, this at some point. The grandfather appears to Simba and says, "Remember who you are." It's shot in Disneyland. That's so Western.
Yeah, true.
So how is it shot in Disneyland, if at all, African spirituality, when we believe in our ancestors, is fetish? We never question. We just buy the narratives without just getting too critical. We swallow without digesting.
So it is about time people question the sort of information they're given. That I do agree with you. And I feel like that's a very important point. And again, we've spoken about this, but I would also want to get it from like an activist perspective. what does conversion practice do to you, to your sense of self, aside from feeling ashamed and dehumanized through your interactions? How do you feel like the conversion practices have affected your sense of self? Masafu.
So, at a personal level, conversion practice made my process of coming out a very lengthy process. And at the end of the day, even as activists, we are human, and we have lived realities, and we get to have very intimate interactions with both the primary and secondary effects of conversion practice. So it, of course, takes a psychological toll on us as activists, whether directly or indirectly, through the work that we do, getting to experience the experiences of survivors who've gone through conversion practice, and even just the reality, the quiet, silent reality that almost 9 out of 10 queer people have experienced harmful conversion practice. So it is an invisible monster that lives with us and has an effect on our everyday life as queer people, as activists, and we cannot not state the direct indirect effects that conversion practice has on all of us.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I'd like us to at least have the final reflections and what we can leave our listeners and viewers thinking about. So I'll start with you, Fauna. If you could speak to the religious leaders, what message would you want to tell them, especially under the theme of conversion violence?
I think I'll speak just for the Christians, from a Christian perspective, because I know that in Africa we have all those religion manifestations. How we read our texts, scriptures, is wanting. We have never been able to call the Bible a colonial tool. We shy away from naming it. And I think it's time that we get from the text that which is not prescribed, because it's a biblical, it's a whole history of a people. I normally say that if Kikuyus were able to document their stories, the chameleon and the interaction of how they'll die would be synonymous with a snake eating some apples, which is really, so it's a myth.
Yeah.
And we have never been able to be bold enough to appreciate that this is a Jewish myth, this is an African myth. So to be able to name that and understand that the Bible is telling about a culture which does not have to be prescribed to the people today. It has a lot of rich wisdom because there's a lot of sage within it, but it's not prescribed. We can draw from it, but we do not have to prescribe it, because African culture is equally rich. And not culture, African cultures are equally rich. So I'd like to tell Christians that let's be critical. Let's read the text with wisdom, not just prescribe it. The letter to the Corinthians is not the letter to the Kikuyus. It's not the letter to the Luos.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you get a letter to the Luos, why are you reading someone's letter? Like, for real? Yeah, so
It's not meant for you. Okay,
Yeah.
that's a good reflection. Prof, I'll come to you. What's your message to the queer youth out there facing pressure to convert?
The queer youth, not the queer youth,
Yeah.
the queer population.
Uh-huh.
You see, knowledge is important. Knowledge is important. Seek knowledge. So, in my world, in my room, when I've closed the door, advocacy works a lot. It opens many doors. Uh, but more significantly, what you know, apply it. So knowledge and skills should go hand in hand. It is important to know, and this for the larger population, the politicians, the theologians, the teachers, the elders. It is important to know what is it that they are doing? How is it? How are they doing it? And why they are doing it? That brings me to this question. You see, culture, Flora has talked about culture, and which is true. I keep telling people, Paul was afraid, and he writes to my friend Timothy, my name is Francis. Why would you read to me Timothy's letter? That is confidential. Actually, it is illegal given the Data Protection Act. Unasoma barua zangu kwa nini? Culture has two aspects. It has the uncritical part. Honor thy mother and father. It is not Christian. It's just a cultural thing. It's just human that you should respecting elders. But culture also has the critical part, critical, reflecting on it, justifying it, creating theories, giving it space to interact with other cultures. Many of us are very comfortable living in the uncritical aspect. We always justify our actions by saying, this is our customs and traditions, as if it is the alpha and omega. You see, very few of us live at the critical aspect. And if you live at the critical aspect, they start asking those questions. You know Charles Njonjo, the late Charles Njonjo was our AG for a long, long time, independent AG. But you know, when Charles Njonjo married, we used to get shocked. How can he not marry? I mean, why? But he didn't marry. After we waited for his 30s. We waited for his 40s. He didn't marry. Then 50s. So he now said he's not getting married. Then he decided to marry. In Africa, that is not okay. Number two, being single is a big problem. You must have a partner. Must you have a partner? Number three, being single parent like me and my man, she's a lady, she has a child, and I have a child of our own. It is very difficult. So, not having affairs with a person of opposite sex and gender, for Africans, their mind is closed. They can't imagine it. Now that they can't imagine it, obviously it is wrong. So they say, we must change you and come back to what is normal. So I think advocacy, there is a lot of room for advocacy. There's a lot of room for knowledge, society to open up. Dictatorship of the many is not very good. One man, one woman can be right when a million are actually wrong.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for those reflective words. Masafu, I'd really want to hear from you as well. What do you wish every queer person who's being told change could hear right now?
Conversion violence is torture, number one. Number two is that the Constitution of Kenya safeguards from torture, and freedom from torture is an absolute right. And number three, which is my most favorite, I wish I could make a song out of it, is that for the very first time in the history of our country, the Supreme Court created a class of protection from discrimination as sexual orientation. And this is through the landmark case by the National Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission. So what we have is that we have such beautiful legal fodder to pursue legislation that criminalizes conversion practice. And yes, conversion practice is an offense that people will be held liable if they commit. So I think for me is to encourage for survivors to seek redress. There's a lot of justice that has been spewed out through our court for cases around conversion practice. And most importantly is that there's hope, there's legal hope. The African Commission has spoken, the UN Human Rights Council has spoken, independent expert on sexual orientation and gender identity has spoken. So I think to say that we have legal fodder and there's a lot of hope towards not just having legislation that criminalizes conversion practice, but also defending against injustices that occur out of conversion practice. Yeah. And hopefully we are moving towards decriminalization.
Hopefully.
We must.
Yeah, thank you so much for your courage, for your resilience, and even availing your time to just discussing this topic. And of course, to our listeners, specifically for this episode, listen to it, talk about it, protect each other, because silence only fuels violence. So thanks for listening. Enjoy the rest of your day.